With love from Cord, Raila's open letter to President Kenyatta.
Every Kenyan, our utterances, whether inside a rally or just at a place like this, in this press conference, must be responsible and within the law.
The leadership is a calling from God. And this calling from God also demands us to use the privilege with the responsibility.
Stop the hate. Pressure mounts on leaders to sit down and talk.
Ni mzuri wapewe juu hata mkikataa wapewe watatumia hiyo na watapata na ukimwi.
Ni sawa tu na kumpa mwizi bunduki ambayo imejaa risasi.
Condoms for children. Heated debate of a proposed new law. And paying the price. America cuts aid to Uganda over anti-gay law. A very good evening to you and welcome to this edition of KTN Friday Briefing. My name is Edith Kimani. From the helm, you can tell that it's going to be an adrenaline-packed bulletin courtesy of our guest anchors. They're called the Haraka Mamas, and as you can probably tell from their name, it's going to be a lot of fun. Probably running or racing. Well, I don't want to give too much away. Why don't you stay tuned and find out? We'll also be having live in studio the British High Commissioner Christian Turner. He has a lot to say about the security situation in Kenya and his government's position on that. Do stay tuned for it. And all your Friday briefing favorites. I'm talking about Willis the Word Master. He'll be joining us live from Kisumu and he'll be teaching us how to say, well, you have to wait to find out. So that's all coming your way shortly. But right now, let's begin with some developing content. We're talking about the letter from Cord. And 9 opposition members of parliament have now been summoned to record statements for alleged hate speech following the recent wave of rallies. Now, the 9, comprising senators and members of the National Assembly, have been cited by police and their files, and now with the Director of Public Prosecutions. They include Senators Boni Khalwale, James Orengo, Hassan Omar, Johnston Muthama, and Elizabeth Ongoro. Others are members of the National Assembly, Jakoyo Midiwo of Kem, Simba Arati of Dagoretti North, Junet Mohammed of Suna East, and TJ Kajwang of Roraka. Now, the summonses came as Cord leader Raila Odinga wrote an open letter to President Uhuru Kenyatta in which he sent what he called a hand of peace to the president, quoting heavily from the Bible and from civil rights campaigners Martin Luther King Jr. and Mahatma Gandhi. Let's now look at some of those quotes. It's pretty straightforward. A lot of people have said that the former Prime Minister is having what they're calling a climb down. Here's what he had to say about the president and the utterances that have been made. I seek no offense or reward. Cord does not want to share power with the Jubilee administration. This is, of course, in light of what some people may have said with regard to what Cord is after. Before that, he had said, however, that he backs the fight against terror in all manner of ways. And he also did say that there are obvious signs that if we do not confront these problems and challenges now through a structured process of national dialogue, then the road to peace will be thorny and difficult. And then he quotes the Bible. I therefore urge you, my brother, you here being President Uhuru Kenyatta, to read the words of Prophet Isaiah found in chapter 1, verse 18. I will now proceed to read that. Come now and let us reason together, saith the Lord. Though your sins be scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they be red like crimson, they shall be as wool. If ye be willing and obedient, ye shall eat good of the land. But if ye refuse and rebel, ye shall be devoured with the sword. So his position being very clear on that. But then he goes on to extend an olive branch. So I offer a hand of peace and an olive branch so that we may dwell in unity, peace, and liberty. And then he proceeds to conclude by saying, I want to assure your excellency that we hold no grudges, nor do we want to interfere with your tenure. In other news, the Inspector General of Police and the National Police Service Commission have announced the promotion of 7 police officers for bravely repulsing the attackers who hit the Mpeketoni Police Station and the DO's office on Sunday night. Now, under KTN's Ferdinand Ondi reports, residents of Mpeketoni are slowly getting back to their normal lives after the worst possible start to their week. Here's more.
Friday morning in Mpeketoni. The streets are finally alive again. Locals have enjoyed a torrid week in which attackers killed 60 people in 2 nights of terror and destroyed millions worth of property. The burnt remains of a car welcomed customers to Zachariah Ngugi's shop. Ngugi has decided to look beyond the scars and make supplies available to the people again.
Sisi tumeamua tufungue tu sababu chakula zetu kuna maziwa, kuna nini inasaharibikia dukani. Kasema tusaidie wananchi sababu tukifunga wataendelea tu kuumia.
But Zachariah has noted a different attitude to shopping. His buyers are taking away necessities, especially food, in bulk and not in packets and sachets as has been the norm.
Unga wa ugali wananunua sana, wananunua bundle, na hapo awali ambao walikuwa wananunua bundle ni watu ambao wako na duka ndogo. Lakini sasa tunaona kilo moja, hata kama ni mji ananunua kama bundle moja, kama ni maharagwe ananunua kilo 5, anaenda anajiwekea.
The new trend points to a people still uncertain about their security. Ever since killers walked from door to door on Monday and Tuesday night, picking off men and shooting them dead, everyone is extra cautious, even the businessmen.
Siku hiyo ingine walianza kama saa 2. Kwa hivyo ikifika 6:30 tunafunga ili kila mmoja anaweza kuwa ameenda kwake nyumbani.
The market is no different. Priscilla Njoki proudly displays her wares, appetizing juicy mangoes picked off from the trees in her home. Ordinarily, these mangoes should be flying out of the stall, but not today.
Usalama umerudi, lakini kasi ndio imefifia. Bado wengine hata wajafungua kasi, bado wanauoga.
Mpeketoni is an agricultural area with very productive farms labored on by the industrious residents who first arrived here in the 60s. It has survived all manner of violence, including the Tana River clashes of yesteryear, until someone brought violence to their door. Abubakar Mohammed Khatib, a leader with the Okoa Lamu initiative, claims the attack may have been triggered to play poker with the religious and cultural diversity that has thrived for over 40 years.
Hata wakati ilipotokea fujo 207 katika Kenya nzima, lakini ulikuta ndani ya Lamu kulikuwa na amani. Kwa hivyo sisi twalani kitendo kama hichi, na hawa ambao walofanya vitendo kama hivi ni fitna ambao kwamba zimeletwa ili kutaka kugawanya, yani sisi kuleta fitna baina sisi wenyeji wa Lamu na wenyeji ambao sasa tuwaita ni wenyeji, yani watu Mpeketoni.
Many theories have since emerged as the country tries to digest who did this and why. Unfortunately, the theories have led to blame games, accusation and counter-accusation, which have threatened even the stability of other regions in Kenya.
Wajua fitna ni kitu kilicholala. Kwa hivyo tusije tukakiamsha, kwa sababu Mwenyezi Mungu anatuambia sisi ndani ya kitabu chetu Qur'ani kwamba fitna ni mbaya kushinda kuua.
Kwa hivyo Kenya tumi ningeomba ni ya kwamba watu warudi kama kawaida, nao serikali waingie tu, sababu hapa kwetu huwa tulipishi kama sisi wa Kristo, huwa tulipishi.
Hate has spread from political circles into social media and even on Kenyan streets. What should have united the country against a common enemy is threatening to turn into a bottomless pit that could swallow the whole country. The people who know what death is firsthand are warning against unrestrained talk.
Sisi tunataka amani. Unajua amani ikiwa itaharibika ndani ya nyumba yako huwa hapana masikilizano. Je, ikiwa itatokea ndani ya nchi nzima itakuwa hali gani?
It will take time to restore peace, calm, confidence and trust in Mpeketoni. For now, the streets are dotted with heavily armed men in uniform and the skies roaring with police and military choppers. It's been a traumatizing week for the people of Mpeketoni and the country at large. They have witnessed death and destruction firsthand, and the people who have been here before will tell you it is nothing to wish upon yourself or even your neighbor. Unfortunately, the events here are threatening to pull the country apart instead of pulling us together because of recklessness across the board. It takes a punch to start a fight. It takes a word to start a war. Stop the hate. Ferdinand Mondi, KTN, Mpeketoni, Lamu.
Still on Mpeketoni, although the residents are picking up the pieces so as to move on with their lives, There are answers which they are yet to have answered, and for the rest of the country as well, which would still like to have answered. Well, KTN's John Alanamu looks at the missing links and the contradictions in the police story about the resolution of the attack.
It's painful to watch, but even more painful to live through. The terror attack in Mpeketoni and the investigations into who is responsible, though, are making the process of understanding the entire episode rather painful for Kenyans. First, there was this.
This, therefore, was not an Al-Shabaab terrorist attack. Evidence indicates that local political networks were involved in the planning and execution of the heinous crime.
Followed very swiftly by this. A statement from Al-Shabaab's military operations spokesman Abdulaziz Abu Musab. A claim of responsibility for the attack by the Al-Shabaab had come earlier via a Twitter handle associated with the group. Then came the news that the police had arrested a man called Ishmael Omondi in Majengo on Wednesday. It was he who allegedly operated this Twitter account and had put out the claim. The police didn't take the opportunity to score a propaganda victory and distribute images of the man they had arrested, putting a face to the hateful messages. Moments later, the account was still being updated with sarcastic messages to the government. As Ishmael was being arrested, did the police disable this account? Does it have another user? Those are answers that the police won't get from the faceless Ishmael, as 2 days after his arrest, sections of the media reported that he had been released for lack of evidence. Then the KDF announced that it had killed 5 of the Mpeketoni attackers as they crossed into Somalia. Does the government have the names of the attackers? With the Westgate siege, the pseudonyms of the attackers were given to reassure the public that the government at least knew who they were dealing with. The government faces a serious challenge in finding the terrorists who killed people in Mpeketoni. But in carrying public support with it, having a narrative that sticks could be crucial. John Alanamu, KTN.
The 2013 presidential candidates Martha Karua and Peter Kenneth have asked Jubilee and CORD politicians to seek a middle ground in the dialogue standoff to help diffuse tensions in the country. Now, this sentiment was also echoed by Catholic Archbishop John Cardinal Njue and ACK's Eliud Wabukala, who said a solution should be found within the law and within reason. Here's Patrick Amimo with the details.
After much silence, even as the political arena got heated with the CORD and Jubilee standoff, the 2 former presidential candidates finally came out to weigh in on the tension gripping the nation. NARC Kenya has called on President Uhuru Kenyatta to unite Kenyans by convening a national forum comprising representatives of the county governments, political stakeholders, religious leaders, and civil society.
Rallies are not a problem, but every Kenyan, our utterances, whether inside a rally or just at a place like this, in this press conference, must be responsible and within the law. And the medicine for all this is for us to reason together.
In as much as I appreciate that dialogue is an important aspect of building consensus on our way forward, we must be responsible in the statements that we make, so that we can hold the country together. I'm very discouraged with the 2 extreme positions taken by both the government and the opposition, because we cannot afford to tear our country to pieces. We must see that we talk to each other to make this country be what it is supposed to be.
The leaders questioned why officers from the National Intelligence Service and Directorate of Criminal Intelligence have been unable to stop terror attacks despite the high budgetary allocations.
These 3 units must be held accountable and responsible for what is happening. In particular, the intelligence unit must come under full scrutiny. At the moment, our intelligence is acting like a post-mortem report.
There is a disconnect between the two levels of government, the county and the national. And we think that a serious issue to enhance security is to discuss the involvement of county governments.
The heads of the Catholic and Anglican churches in Kenya have cautioned against holding public rallies at this time and asked the government and opposition to agree on a way forward to resolve the country's pressing issues peacefully and lawfully.
We shall definitely not allow our churches and religious functions to be platforms for peddling inflammatory remarks, abuse, and indeed disharmony.
And therefore we are calling upon all leaders, particularly political leaders, to understand that leadership is a calling from God. And this calling from God also demands us to use the privilege with the responsibility.
Now Kenya wants the government to review and strengthen law enforcement agencies and involve county governments in matters of security. Patrick Amimo, KTN.
Well, that story leads us to a big question this evening, and we're asking you, should President and the government, President Uhuru Kenyatta and the government of Kenya hit the call for dialogue? That's our question, and we ask you to send your views to 22155. You can SMS us on that number. You could also talk to us on our Twitter handle. That's at KTN Kenya. Now, the threats of terror due to threats of terror in the country, the U.S. Embassy has said the staff there will be reduced so that they're relocated to other countries. Now, other embassies in Nairobi are also taking precautions to keep their nationals safe. But as Najma Ismail reports, the British High Commission has denied reports that they are evacuating their people from coastal towns.
We have not evacuated anybody. That is incorrect. 300 people left on one charter plane, 25,000 remain. We have 3 more levels in our travel advice before we get to evacuations. The travel advisory was very specific. It was against one area of Mombasa Island and the area immediately surrounding it. That is a very serious issue, I understand, with consequences, but it was not against the whole country, and I was not advising 25,000 people to leave. The travel advice for Nairobi, for the national parks, has not changed.
This was the reaction the envoy was giving after reports that the British government had evacuated its nationals from Kenya over terror attacks. However, just days before the Mpeketoni attack in Lamu, the UK government closed their honorary consulate in Mombasa due to security concerns, stating that all consular services will be offered from the High Commission in Nairobi. But the commissioner was quick to say that they have not abandoned Kenya on the issue of terrorism.
It is not true that somehow Kenya is being abandoned on the issue of terrorism. The tragic and terrible events of this week in Mpeketoni show us that on these issues we must all work together. This is a global threat. It can only be dealt with by a global response, and the British government is working extremely closely with the government of Kenya to try and respond to that threat.
The US government, on its part, warned its citizens on the risks of traveling to Kenya at this time, and that those considering travel should evaluate their personal security. In a statement posted on its website, the US Embassy said that the US government continues to receive information about potential terrorist threats aimed at the US, Western and Kenyan interests in Kenya, including the Nairobi area and the coastal cities of Mombasa and Diani. US Ambassador Robert Godek has sent a letter to embassy employees in Nairobi stating that they are taking new security steps, including additional security personnel coming from Washington next week, and that the embassy is reducing the size of the staff because of recent threat information. The US Embassy has also reportedly asked Kenya to provide them with more security officers around the embassy. Najma Ismail, KTN Friday Briefing.
Well, that story leads to our discussion this evening, and as you can see, I'm joined on set by Christian Turner, the British High Commissioner. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
So let's begin where Najma Ismail has left off. The US has issued another travel advisory, and this is, of course, coming in light of all the advisories that your government has been issuing. And so my first question is there an actual credible threat to British nationals in Kenya?
Well, I should explain the way we do our advisories. It's constantly updated. If viewers want to go and see what we are saying to our nationals, it's on the Foreign Office website, and that can be updated as three times a day. So after, say, the attack in Mpeketoni, terrible incident, we say, please avoid the area, something is happening. So it's much more live and relevant. We judged, to answer your question, Edith, we did judge that in the case of Mombasa, where we specifically issued that warning in the middle of May, that there was a credible and imminent threat to British nationals, and that's why we advised against anything but essential travel to Mombasa Island and the coastal area immediately north and south.
All right, now I read that advisory that you're talking about, and it's obviously to specific areas. And the second question perhaps is there direct involvement in trying to secure the country, Kenya, from the British government?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the big messages that I have is that we are working extremely closely with the Kenyan government in all sorts of ways to try and help keep Kenya safe. A secure Kenya is a secure Britain. That's very much in our shared interest.
But when you say you're working in different ways, do you have any specific examples? Are you sharing intelligence?
So, for example, we are working with the border police, handing over equipment. We are working at the airport and the ports to try and keep the border safe. We are working with the police to encourage training and capacity building. And yes, on the specific question of the assessment we had, we did share the information that led to the assessment that we made with the Kenyan government.
Okay, let me take you back to the advisories and with regard to how Kenya is reacting to how the British government is obviously handling things. May 19th, after a fresh advisory was issued and we saw the mass exodus of tourists, President Uhuru Kenyatta very emotionally said, quoting George Bush, that if they are not with us, they are against us. And he said that the exodus was an insult. So I'm just wondering what your feelings on this are.
Well, I think the first thing I'd say is your use of the word mass exodus is, I think, incorrect. 300 people left on a flight because their package tour company...
But to be fair, that was unprecedented.
Well,
there are people who had been in the country for 2 days, some 24 hours, some less.
But I'm asking for a comparison. I have 25,000 Brits who live in Kenya, committed to the country.
Fair enough.
300 left. I don't think mass exodus is the right phrase to use.
The exit of 300 plus British nationals from Kenya.
Yeah.
And it resulted to this reaction. So my question to you was your feelings.
To address the point, I understand that people feel that that they are being abandoned. But one of my messages is Kenya is not being abandoned. Every government has a responsibility to its citizens and to keep them safe. We saw this when Kenya took its citizens out of South Sudan. We all have to do it. It's a legal requirement for a government to say when it thinks there is a threat. We don't enforce that, though. So individuals have to decide. Some people will say, I don't care what the British government says, I still want to go to Mombasa. Some will never go near it. So we have to allow people to take that choice on an informed basis.
I like what you said about Kenya not being abandoned, but it sort of felt that way in November of 2012 when you said that business with Kenya is going to be left to essential business. Those were your exact words. And then following that, there was sort of policy coming out of UK and Europe in particular saying that the dealing and involvement with Kenya will be arm's length. Is it still the case, or will this continue until the ICC cases are done?
Well, I think that's, again, a slight misrepresentation of what the policy and the position was at the time. That was a global policy shared by many countries, the UK included, about essential contact with ICC indictees. I think all I would say on the ICC is that process is ongoing. The President and the Deputy President have always been very clear about their commitment to meet international obligations and carry on cooperating. That's what they're doing. It's a judicial process, not a political one, and it will play out its course.
So speaking of misrepresentation, it would be really nice if you clarify to us what essential contact really means.
Well, we've always avoided defining what essential contact means. You will never have seen the European Union or the UN saying that. What is very clear is these cases are against two individuals, and relations between the government of Kenya and the government of Great Britain and other countries are unaffected in the sense of that contact, which was the first country to invite President Uhuru Kenyatta to travel after he was elected. It was the United Kingdom who invited him to London in May of 2013, which was the first country to congratulate Uhuru Kenyatta after he got elected. It was my government when the Prime Minister wrote to him the evening of the Supreme Court judgment. So I think those facts slightly stand in the way that, that this perception that somehow Kenya has been abandoned.
All right. Speaking of the conferences that obviously the British government is overseeing in Somalia, you're obviously playing a very key role with even personnel from the UK being involved in the UN mission in Somalia. But there are also allegations that there's this involvement from British nationals. We're talking about the White Widow, we're talking about Grant. And so how should the Kenyan government, in your opinion, deal with this situation, given that there's crime in every sector, rather from all corners.
Well, I mean, in the case of Somalia, these are fantastically complicated and difficult challenges, and the threat which Kenya now faces is something that any government in the world would find incredibly hard to deal with. It is true that there are some what we call foreign fighters, people who go to Somalia. One of the reasons we are so concerned about helping to support a more stable and secure Somalia is the threat that could take back to the British mainland. I think it's very important that we work together with countries in the region, the government of Somalia, the government of Kenya on that.
You've always maintained that development equals security, so what is the future of the economic relations between Kenya and the UK, given that those figures have been declining in terms of direct foreign investment?
Yeah, well, they haven't been declining. It was, I think, over a 30% increase between 2010 and 2011.
But you've been knocked off from being the highest foreign, direct foreign investor to fourth.
So let's check the figures. The largest trading partner outside East Africa for Kenya is Britain. The over 30% of exports go to the EU. 5 of the largest taxpayers in Kenya are British companies. The 2 largest private sector employers in Kenya are British companies. So this idea that it's a competition, Edith, is exactly what I'm trying to reject. It's a multipolar world. It's not a choice between east or west or north and south. Everyone benefits from investment in Kenya. That is a good thing. So if China is investing here, is building roads and infrastructure, that benefits British interests. I'm very relaxed and excited about Chinese investment here. That doesn't give Britain a problem.
Speaking of Chinese investments, where they're not is in Mira or CAT. And yesterday, Aidan Duale did ask for a 5-year grace period from the government of UK so that they could have the people who are doing this business look for other alternatives. I'm just wondering what your position in this is.
Yeah, well, he did ask for that, and we are very conscious of the impact that this ban will have in parts of Kenya. The policy was first proposed in 2010. It was then announced properly in 2013, and it will come into British law on the 24th of June. It has passed through the government, it has passed through Parliament. That is the sovereign wish of the government and the Parliament, so it will come into effect. I think the important thing is for us to work with those parts of Kenya affected, to support them with their economic development as best we can, and help them find alternative sources of income generation.
All right, and before we wind up, I have to ask you, yesterday I did see Gitua Kahengeri at the Queen's birthday. Very unexpected. Mau Mau spokesperson attending the Queen's birthday. Is this a big a gesture as we think it is, especially given that there's another case ongoing with the Mau Mau and the British government?
Well, I've got great respect for the Mzee. He is a man of dignity. He talks about understanding, about humility, and I think it shows just how far the relations between our two countries have come. The fact that we signed that settlement last year, I don't think has got quite the recognition that it should have done.
Yeah.
It was a real moment of reconciliation, of building links and friendship, despite that shared and difficult history. And to be able to invite the Mzee to the Queen's birthday, I think is a very significant signal of just how modern and vibrant our relationship is.
And finally, the most important question this evening. How do you feel about the English team being essentially knocked out of the World Cup? I had to ask.
You saved the most difficult question till last. It is not something I particularly want to talk about. I think I've just been told that indeed England has been knocked out of the World Cup. You know, last night I was teasing my Spanish colleague because he was not very happy, and now I'm in an extremely uncomfortable position. What can I say? We'll have to wait for the Commonwealth Games and all those Kenyan runners coming to get lots of medals in Glasgow.
I like the sound of that. Thank you for joining us this evening on KTN Friday Briefing and for all those clarifications. Remember, you can get this statement following that story by Najma Ismail on www.standardmedia.co.ke. But here's a reminder of our big question this evening. Should the president heed the call for dialogue? Should the president heed the call for dialogue? Remember to send your views in on our SMS number 22155 or send us a tweet on @KTN Kenya. We take a short commercial break, and when we come back, how would you feel if your mom was in a rally and if she was a really good rally driver? Well, we'll be talking to the women who do just that when we come back. Stay tuned. Safety or immorality? Condoms for Kids bill triggers hot debate.
You are watching
another suit in the studio and another helmet. We're getting in the business of being addicted to adrenaline on KTN Friday Briefing. This evening, I have with me the Haraka Mamas. They may not look like it, but they really are mothers. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm talking about Joan Nesbitt and Dr. Tamara Jones. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So tell us what you do. You're rally drivers.
Yes, we
How
are.
did that happen?
It's amazing. We've always had this passion for rallying. I mean, we used to go for all the rallies way before when, from Jaginder Singh. That's how, anyway, we won't go there. But we used to watch all this rallying. Then one day our husband said, listen, ladies, would you like to rally? And we're like, yes. So they said, right, let's do it. And so here we are. That's how we came to be.
So this was in 2011 when this grand idea came to you.
Yes.
How did you even begin? I mean, you decide, okay, I want to be a rally driver. Do you then say, I've got my driver's license and I've got a car, I'm good to go? Tamara.
No, because there's a lot of preparation that goes into it. First of all, the most important thing is the roll cage, which has saved us numerous times. So,
And what is that? I'm not familiar with these terms.
Go ahead.
Okay, it's an amazing structure that is in the car. It's like roll bars. You know what roll bars are? They go around the car and it's like a fixture. It's like the skeleton of the car that sits there and it encases you in the car. And it's very strong and it keeps you actually very safe. Trust me, it keeps you very safe. We've done a couple of maneuvers where we have rolled up to date 3 times.
3 times?
3 times. And we have been very safe. I mean, the first roll, we were like, what happened? We're like,
And we're hanging upside down, and Joni goes, I think we rolled. And we're just like this.
And Tamara says, my nail's broken.
Oh, gosh. Proper ladies.
Yes.
So obviously very adrenaline filled. Your husband's fully backing you. I'm really curious to know if your kids thought, these guys are crazy.
They first thought, really? And then they're like, what? My mom rallies?
What did your mothers think?
My mom thinks it's absolutely brilliant.
Really?
Yes, it's so much fun.
I really hope my mother is listening to this. So your mom thought it was brilliant.
My mom loved it. She said, like, go ahead. I've been a tomboy all my life. My mom's like, go ahead. Do what makes you happy.
Okay, so obviously to have gone into this together, you're trusting each other with your lives essentially.
Exactly.
Being the navigator, being the driver.
Yes.
You must have known each other a really long time.
Yes, yes. For a very long time. I first met Tammy, oh my God, it's over 16 years ago. It's about I've known her 16 years.
Yeah.
And when we first met, it was very interesting because she came into our lives and we're like, oh, this is a new lady here and everything. She told us, I don't cook. And I'm like, okay. She says, I navigate. I said, I drive.
Okay, so you drive and you don't cook. That's sorted. And we know that your husband is also heavily involved in motorsports.
Yes.
And so was this difficult for you going into rallying? People saying, okay, you're never going to be as good as your husband. You're probably doing this for fun. You're never going to finish. How was that initially, the challenges?
I think people are really shocked because we're actually kind of good. And
when you say kind of good, what does that mean?
I mean, we finished second in Safari Rally in 2-wheel drive, and only 2 cars in our group finished. So I think by now people are used to us, and I think they kind of treat us like one of the guys now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Before it was like, ugh, these chicks, what do they think they're doing? And then when we actually started posting some really good times, they're like, hold on, wait a minute. And they all got new cars.
They all got new cars.
Yes.
All right, so you said you don't cook, you said you drive, and you got a brand new car, rather people are getting brand new cars so that they can rally. Let's see how good you are at reading the news. They don't call it guest anchor for nothing. So you have to decide, that's right, I hadn't told them, I waited to surprise them. You have to decide which one of you is going to read.
You already said me.
You're it. Please face camera 2. You can see it. And then all we need you to do is introduce yourself, say who you are, and then read.
And I don't do blah, 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 blah.
No, you're not allowed to do that.
Okay.
When you're ready.
When I'm ready.
Yes. Shout out to our sponsor.
Okay, I'm ready. My name is Joan Nesbitt, and this is the 9 o'clock news. Proposing the introduction of condoms and other types of contraceptives to children aged between 10 and 17 years has sparked an intense debate amongst Kenyans. Those in support of the Senate bill argue that young people are engaging in sex at a very early age, and Kenyans cannot continue burying their heads in the sand. But others insist the bill portends a moral disaster for Kenya. Carolyn Derry reports.
Again, contraceptives to be given what age? The possibility of radically redefining the years of innocence, an age group Kenyan societies have fiercely shielded from sexual matters for decades, has gotten Kenyans talking. The Reproductive Healthcare Bill 2014 intends to make it possible and legal for children as young as 10 to have access to condoms and other contraceptives. The bill, proposed by nominated Senator Judith Sijen, defines adolescents as those aged between 10 and 17 years, indicating that they have a right to access modes of family planning. Some people have received this news with outrage.
Giving them condoms is like giving a thief a loaded gun to go and shoot himself.
Wanafunzi kiwa raimani wafundisha kuhusu sex, lakini si ati kupata condom. Kupata condom ndio kwa blana kubwa sana.
Sana sijui vile wafanye, lakini usipatiwe.
Abstain, wasome kwanza.
Dini inatuambia mpaka uolewe ndio uwe na mwanaume.
Hujafikisha hiyo miaka na hii itakuwa ni tabia mbaya kwa hao.
However, not all hold this view. Stella Kabera, who is a greengrocer in Rorengo in Nyeri, says providing these services to young people is long overdue as they are indulging in sex at an early age anyway. There are those who agree with Stella.
Naona ni mzuri wapewe juu hata mkikataa wapewe watatumia hiyo na watapata na ukimwi.
Mimi maoni yangu naonekana ni kweli afadhali wapewe.
A section of the education sector stakeholders are saying the bill could trigger moral decadence in the society.
We should equip them with knowledge. We should enhance the reproductive health education in our schools. Let it be an integral part of the school system so that a child is equipped. We all know that knowledge is power.
And then I lost my good friend. The arrow came from the west. Or was it the east?
The reception among some in religious leadership has not been welcoming of the bill either.
Christianity teaches us that sex is between two people, those who are married. That is what God ordains, not anything else.
Na hii ni jukumu la mzazi kuzuia mtoto. Lakini sasa mtoto akienda skulu, akienda nyumbani na kondom, muoneshe mzazi amwambie tumepewa hii skulu. Hii kwanza ni kutoa nguo wazazi wake. Na ni vibaya sana. Na mnaona dunia sasa vile inaendelea, watoto wanaendelea wakiharibiwa kwa mambo mengi sana ya ulevi, bangizi.
It is undoubtedly a touchy topic that will continue eliciting heated debates amongst Kenyans, and whether the bill will be passed or not, that remains to be seen. Carol Derry, KTN, Nyeri.
So we're back with the Haraka Mamas. So the story that just ran, contraceptives for pupils who are in primary school, what's your feel on that?
I feel like it's better to be safe than sorry. I mean, at this point, you might as well have your children be protected instead of sneaking behind your back. I know it's a tough call, but you know what to do.
I don't know what other answer I would have expected from you. You're not the conventional mother, really. So I have to ask you, how old are you guys?
I'm 51.
You're 51?
Proud of it.
Can you see my face? And how old are you?
I'm 47, and
you're
really proud of it.
So anyway,
moving on
swiftly. How did the name Haraka Mamas come on? I can imagine, because your energy, you're so vibrant. It's impossible to keep up with you.
It was
you
really
18-year-olds.
You know? No? We used to have, we're always with Tammy. We've always been together for so long. And so we used to have these camp sessions. And my husband was always like, Haraka, get in the car, Haraka, do everything, Haraka. So it's like, why don't we just call you the Haraka Mamas? You're always in Haraka mode anyway. Tammy's running off somewhere and doing stuff. Very organized lady, I must say. And I'm running off doing the other thing.
Why I'm the navigator.
Coordinating. Just good coordinating everything together.
I really like this banter that's happening. All right, so does this make it very easy for you to sell your product, i.e. getting sponsorship? Because you're not maybe selling the win, you're selling this chemistry that you have. Tamara, she says her name is Tamara, not Tamara.
You would think it would be easy, but we have a new sponsor, Focus Container Freight Station, and he is allowing us to do Nanyuki, and that's why we are back.
You're
so
back.
excited.
Okay.
Very excited.
Yes.
All right. So
but it has been hard. I think is it the concept that is it the men don't understand that women can rally? We're still trying to get it together.
Do you know who is really going to answer that question for us? Our business anchor, Boni Tunya, who you're handing over to tomorrow.
Okay.
Do it on which camera, director? Cam 2. There we go.
Can I see it?
Yes. You don't have to read anything. Just introduce his name and say he's bringing the sport segment. Don't look so stunned.
This business will start on an inspirational note, and Kenya's Irene Koki Mutungi was in April certified as Africa's first female captain of the aviation industry currency sensation Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Michael Karanja spoke to her recently on a trip from France. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner takes off from the Charles de Gaulle Airport on its 8-hour journey to Nairobi. At the helm of Kenya Airways' new machine is a woman who has broken many records in the aviation field. Captain Irene Koki Mutungi is a woman of many firsts. She is the first woman on the African continent to captain the newest plane in the market, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. The promotion to fly the plane comes after she broke another milestone after becoming the first female pilot at Kenya Airways to captain the Boeing 767, which the airline is slowly retiring to be replaced with the Dreamliners. For Captain Mutungi, it has been a stellar rise in the field of aviation. It should then not come as any surprise that from the age of 17, she started her flying lessons at the Kenya School of Flying, later to Oklahoma City Flight School, that she is a pace setter for other African women.
From a very young age, I was exposed to flying. My dad was a pilot with Kenya Airways, and from about the age of 2, we would fly with him, and he'd let us come into the cockpit occasionally. And from way back then, I developed the interest and knew that I wanted to fly.
Her achievements ultimately paved the way for her to be named Africa's first female captain of the Dreamliner, something she holds in high regard.
I consider myself an ambassador for Africa. We come from a very ambitious continent, and where people, both men and women, know that the sky is not the limit. And we have a lot of people in their particular fields of excellence who are leaders in what they do. I consider myself one of those leaders, and I'm proud to be one of those leaders, an ambassador for Africa.
In a male-dominated field, it hasn't been all smooth sailing for the captain. It is, however, this grit that gave her the zeal to aim even higher. Captain Mutungi is leading the cultural revolution in the aviation field, breaking barriers to allow more women to give flying a chance.
Aviation has been a bastion for men over the years, and it's changing, especially in Kenya. We now have 39 women in Kenya Airways amongst 400 pilots. Ratio-wise, that's quite high, amongst the highest in the world. So we're setting an example, and we're heading in the right direction.
But it's not always business for the captain. Like most women, she does enjoy a bit of pampering.
While I'm relaxing, I do pray and meditate. I'm a spa queen, I like spas. And occasionally I do try to play golf and horse riding.
For now, her eyes remain ever glued to the future, and who knows where Captain Mutungi will end up. Michael Karanja, KTN. Question is, what are you doing with your life? Well, listed sugar miller Mumia's Sugar Company has closed shop indefinitely for lack of sugarcane after a boycott by transporters contracted to deliver. Operations at the mill have been on and off since last week when the striking cane transporter downed their tools. Sources indicate the transporter had vowed to paralyze operations even further, arguing that the miller was plotting to kick them out of business as contracting more cane transporting firms. The beleaguered miller KTN business has also sent home 4 directors in purge it says is meant to clean up its operations. Early in the week, the firm's human resources director resigned, further plunging the firm into confusion. Suspended manager director Peter Kebati and commercial director were last week fired by the board on the basis of an ongoing audit. The Institute of Public Certified Accountants is calling on the National Treasury to publish the 2014 financial bill to offer a roadmap on Kenya's tax policy in the coming financial year. Here is Adelaide Chengole.
Despite the gloom being witnessed in Kenya's key economic sectors of tourism and agriculture, the country is still hopeful of a positive economic end in 2014. This has in recent days been boosted by the subscription rate of the debut sovereign bond.
which again is a clear indication that despite of all these things happening in Kenya, people out there have a lot of confidence in the Kenyan economy.
But even with this optimism, ISPAC still believes the government has to pull all the stops if it is to reach its goal of growing the economy by 6.1% in the 2014-2015 financial year.
Operationalizing a 24-hour economy as promised under the Jubilee Manifesto should be jump-started.
ISPAC is also lauding Treasury Cabinet Secretary for singling out wastage in the government and announcing measures to deal with runaway expenditure. According to the Auditor General, Kenya loses 30% of its budget to revenue leakages and corruption annually. As such, ISPAC wants the government to strengthen the capacity of public finance management oversight institutions.
The Supreme Audit Institution has now built its capacity to carry out the value for money audits, just to check that expenditure has been incurred, not just incurred, but incurred for intended purposes.
The institution is also hoping the ongoing tax reform agenda will simplify the tax administration regime and enhance compliance, which will generate additional revenues and reduce public sector deficit, curb inflation, and finance development projects.
So we expect the tax net to widen up. That is what we can say for sure, so that some of the tax people that are supposed to be taxed but are not being taxed now are likely to be taxed as a result of that.
However, ISPAC is appealing to the Treasury to avail the Finance Bill 2014 so that stakeholders can project the tax measures anticipated for this year. Adley Changole, KTN Business.
The Kenya National Chamber of Commerce has called upon the government to set up a fund to cushion small businesses from extreme losses in cases of terror attacks such as the Mpeketoni occurrence. The fund, the chamber says, will be crucial in uplifting small traders without access to insurance to get back to their economic activities. Currently, most insurance firms in Kenya offer political and terror-related cover to businesses. Speaking at the press conference in KNCCI, Chairman Kiprono Kitoni also asked the state to curb rising cases of insecurity now that threaten to cripple Kenya's economy.
So we want to warn workers who absent themselves from work that they will risk losing their jobs. As a chamber, we believe that we must do as much business as we possibly can.
The Capital Markets Authority is keen on broadening the investor base in Kenya by embracing the youth. Now speaking at the Kabrak University, acting CMA Chief Executive Paul Muthaura says the authority through its University Challenge program is creating financial literacy as pathway to increasing financial awareness, which in turn will serve as a prerequisite for wealth creation among the youth.
Students that also supported us in November.
Let's just stand up for him, please. Thank you. Let's just stand up.
We need to move to a point where it goes without saying that why would you go to London? Skills are much better, much stronger in Nairobi. Take your money through there, and through that point invest into the rest of the world. And that's genuinely what is the opportunity that you have through the university and the work that's going on in the School of Business.
Here's a look at how the markets closed this Friday on the Financial Market Report coming up next.
It's now time for one of our KTN Friday briefing specials and favorites, if I may add. We're talking about Mind Your Language with Willis the Wordmaster joining us from Kisumu. Good evening, Willis.
Good evening, Edith. How are you?
I'm very well. It's a bit cold in Nairobi, but we're hanging in there.
That is great.
Well, let's begin our Mind Your Language segment with a word that we've heard pronounced in a lot of different ways. I'm talking about ostracize, meaning to exclude someone from a group. How exactly are you meant to pronounce this word?
This word, I would personally regard it to be a bit simple but tricky. Ostracize. Ostracize. Now the problem is the consonant cluster where we have sounds t and r, or if you like, letter STR. So we say ostracize. Ostracize.
Ostracize. Okay, for anyone who was wondering how that's said, now you know. The second word for this evening, I've heard it said as jewelry. I've heard jewelry. What's the proper way to say this word?
Edith, this word, in fact, I think it's from somebody called Ndirangu, yes. And this word is very tricky. We say jewelry, jewelry. So we say a jewel, then we come to jewelry, but not jewel or jewelry. Most people mispronounce that word like that. But anyway, jewelry is the correct pronunciation.
Jewelry. It's important to buy your girlfriend or your loved one jewelry. Thank you very much, Joseph Ndirangu, for that question. And then here's one of my favorite places to visit when I leave this country. Cathedrals or cathedral. What's the proper way to pronounce this?
That church is not cathedral, not cathedral the way it's commonly mispronounced locally. We say cathedral, cathedral. And I'm happy, Edith, as I said, you are very tough when it comes to those sounds of English, what we call the acceptable phonology. So I'm happy with that. And just as you've said, we say cathedral, cathedral.
Cathedral, all right. And
yes.
Then we have your surprise word for the day. I'm very curious to know what you have for us this evening.
Edith, I believe you've heard about comedian. Comedian. Very common almost everywhere. Even the persons or some of the comedians say comedian. So I've given a hint there. We have the word comedy, but we don't say comedian. That letter E goes through transmutation, what we call the vowel transmutation, and takes the long vowel sound E. So we say comedian, comedian, not comedian. Just like we have the word strategy, but we don't say strategic. That E takes the sound E. So we say strategic, strategic. So comedian, not comedian as locally said. That is my surprise word for tonight, Edith.
So strategic and comedian. Before you go, allow me to ask, a female comedian, is she a comedian or just a comedian? Is there a difference in pronunciation?
Comedian, comedian, dien. Now, you see, there is the stress changes its position. Dien. Now you'll realize that even the spelling changes a bit. So some of these words, the problem we have, Edith, is when we grow up or when we are at the formative stage, we are always told how to pronounce so many words. But unfortunately, some of the ways that we are told to pronounce them are actually defective or wrong. So we just acquire the pronunciations without knowing.
Well, that's why we have you on Mind Your Language, so that you can correct what was taught incorrectly. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Willis.
Thank you, Edith, and looking forward to sharing another Friday night with you. That is next week, and have a wonderful weekend.
Wonderful weekend to you too, Willis. And that has been Mind Your Language with Willis, a wordmaster who never disappoints. Be sure to ask him any questions you have with regard to pronunciation on Twitter. He is very tech savvy, on Willis Ochieng1.
This year. Yes. We're really looking forward to one this
year. Will you come back?
Of course.
Will you have us back?
After you said Buni Tunya, we'll have to consult. I'll have to consult my bosses. They'll be mad at me if I don't ask you this. How do you stay so young? Everyone on Twitter is asking.
We just have fun. We just go out and have fun.
Everything is done within limits. Just do it right.
All right. And that's where we wind up this edition of KTN Friday Briefing. We hope we did it right. Actually, we did do it right. That's why we're so happy and young. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully, we'll see you again next Friday. Good night.